Hmm? Ah!
Are you taking Psych 105 with Professor Walsh?
Yeah, I'm gonna try. She's not afraid of the long words, huh?
Yeah, just pretty intense. A lot of the courses are really tough.
I'm a little upset. I had on good authority that this was a party school.
I think it's supposed to get easier.
I still feel like carrying around a security blanket.
Of human bondage. Have you ever read it?
Oh, I'm not really into porn. I'm trying to cut way back.
No, there's no actual bondage. It's just a novel. I've read it like 10 times. I always keep it by my bed. Security blanket.
We have a security blanket. Unless, of course, you count Mr. Pointy.
Mr. Pointy?
Oh, bike path. So, it's nice to know that I'm not the only entirely confused person on this campus.
Yeah, I suspect there's a lot of us.
Well, I'll look for you in Psych.
Yeah, maybe we can help each other figure out what the hell they're talking about.
Okay.
Maybe even make it through the year.
Good night.
Night.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara. For this episode, we're going to be discussing the season premiere of Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Freshman, directed and written by J.W.
This episode originally aired on October 5th, 1999, and marks Buffy's entrance into the world of college at UC Sunnydale. Some alternative titles in other languages for this episode were Welcome New Students in Spanish. That's lame. And Disappearance on Campus in French.
Very straightforward.
So before we get started, first of all, we're happy to be back from our hiatus.
Woo-hoo!
I had a great time podcasting about Rings of Power and Agatha all along, but there's no way I could have handled 3 podcasts at a time. I would have lost my mind. So sorry for the interruption in coverage, but I think it was good for everyone. And if you haven't listened to those podcasts, Cast of the Rings and the Podcastica Marvel TV cast, I think they went great this season. So
good.
Go over there and check them out.
I second that.
Thank you, Kara. In the future, this season, we're going to start covering not just Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but the spin-off show Angel, which premiered at the same time as Season 4, Episode 1. And we're going to go back and forth. And there's a specific viewing order. It's not always 1-to-1. So we're going to put that in the show notes, and we're going to have that up on the podcastica.com Facebook page. But also at the end of every episode, we'll say which episode is next. So you can follow along with the viewing order, or just watch all the episodes and listen to us indeterminate of when you watch the episodes, because that's how I watch. That's how I listen to rewatch podcasts. I just watch as many episodes as I want, but I listen week to week. And we're going to have Jim and Sam, who have been great guests in the past, joining us for more and more episodes going forward. We're diversifying what we call the Slay Squad, although Kara and I will continue to be the Scooby Duo that we have become.
I love that. Scooby Duo.
Yeah, that's us.
Perfect.
And do some episodes where it's just the two of us. And we're going to have fun. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. From time to time, we're going to have to take breaks and
for sure,
maybe cover other things. But we're all happy to be back. And I can't wait to hear from listeners as we get into, Season 4 has some absolutely fantastic, iconic episodes.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of guests who have put their hands up wanting to come on sometime soon, and we'll slot them in. It's going to be great. With that said, let's go back to 1999.
Oh, 1999. Putting together the flashback portion of this episode was so much fun. It made me want to go back and listen to every song
Yeah.
that was mentioned, because at the time, the number one song in the United States was Heartbreaker by Mariah Carey featuring Jay-Z, who has been in the news recently for not so fun reasons, but that's for another time. Um, and the number one song in the UK was Blue, aka Daba D, by Eiffel 65.
I
That
love
song
that
has been
song.
stuck in my head ever since I made the agenda.
I
It
know.
was so catchy. It made
Yeah.
no sense at the time. I remember being confused, but at our what was it? Our 5th grade end of the year or Christmas party or something, we played it on repeat. And I remember my teacher getting really really mad at us. But it's catchy, you know?
It's so catchy. I'm gonna have to listen to it as soon as we're done recording.
I know. And then the best-selling books at the time on the New York Times bestseller list, number one in fiction, which is what I was reading at the time, is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. And Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom was still number one at nonfiction, but not for much longer. And the US box office at the time, number one is Double Jeopardy. Number two was American Beauty. And number three was The Sixth Sense. And those movies just
Wow.
really epitomized 1999.
I don't remember Double Jeopardy. What is that?
Oh my gosh, that movie drives me crazy now. But so it's Ashley Judd. She's charged with the murder of her husband, but he fakes his death.
Oh, right.
And
So
then
she can kill him
apparently,
again.
yeah,
If,
she
yeah.
learns of this concept, Double Jeopardy, that I remember my crim law professor talking about this movie on the first day of class and how much he hated it. And now I'm like, yep, I understand. For anybody
Yeah.
wondering, that's not how Double Jeopardy works.
Yeah. So the basic concept is you can't be tried twice for the same crime.
Mhm.
But if it turns out the person they think you murdered wasn't murdered, they vacate the first judgment
Yep.
and they
And
will try you for the actual murder if you do it.
Yep. And each
Like,
time with a crime, there are basic elements you have to prove. And one of those elements, fun fact, is the date on which the crime occurred. So if you're charged with murdering someone on, say, December 15th, and they don't, turns out they're not actually dead, and then you can be charged with murdering them on, say,
on a different
February
day.
15th. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. But American Beauty
I mean,
is,
that movie is
gosh,
iconic and it dominated like conversation and the
oh
visual
yeah,
language of the 90s. That scene of Mina Suvari in the
in the
rose
bathtub.
petals,
Yep.
and the whole like plastic bag floating around in the wind thing. I
Yes.
think this is the movie where Kevin Spacey really like went from some people know him as a great character actor to everybody's
Yeah.
talking about how great Kevin Spacey is. Now, since then we've learned some things about Kevin Spacey that
Yeah.
make it awkward to talk about how great of an actor he is, but the truth is he is a great actor. He's just apparently
A
also a
terrible.
reprehensible person.
Yeah. Is it not another teen movie where they spoof the plastic bag floating in the wind scene?
I don't know. I've
Do you
never seen
remember
any
that?
of those.
Oh my gosh. That's all I remember. I think that's all I remember from that movie. And then of course, The Sixth Sense is the reason why I was scared to go in my kitchen from like 12 to 15 at night. That
That's
movie scared
hilarious.
the hell out of me when I should not have seen it in 1999.
No, you
I
were
should
way
have
too
waited.
young. I remember, so cell phones were still like kind of rare and new in
Yeah.
99. And I saw The Sixth Sense in the theater. I went like in the middle of the day, between classes by myself. There's like two other people in the theater.
Oh my
And which is
gosh.
my favorite way to see a movie, by the way. I
Yeah.
love it. I love like how quiet and chill it is. And this movie is so suspenseful, right? There's so many quiet, scary moments. And I was
Mhm.
really into it. And the woman sitting near me, her cell phone rang, and she answered it,
Oh,
and she goes, "Oh no, I can't talk. I'm at a movie. No, I'm in the movie. I'm in the movie." I was like, "Oh, I cannot believe you answered it, and that we all have to listen to you explain to someone that you're like, this is the rudest thing ever."
that's so
Um,
funny that that is what stands out, that you
oh,
remember that still.
I was I am a particularly like rigid person when it comes to talking in movies. I hate it. And I really
Sure.
hate when people get their phone out. And I know that you think when you're sitting in your seat and you have it on your lap that you're not bothering anyone with it, but the light is bothering everyone sitting behind you. We can all see it.
Yep. Especially today. Phone screens are so big and bright. It's just like, it's like a little beacon in the middle
So
of the theater.
if you are one of these people who uses your phone during a movie, sit in the back row.
Don't sit by Penny.
Don't sit by me. I will be furious and I will probably say something really mean to you about it. Actually, no, I will think something at you that's really mean and say nothing. So
Yeah.
that's fine. But anyway, it is an iconic movie, and it burst onto the scene. Everybody was talking about The Sixth Sense. Everybody now, it's like if you haven't seen it, people are like, "You haven't seen The Sixth Sense?"
Oh, yeah.
And it's famous for having some twists and turns that most people don't see coming, and it brought us M. Night Shyamalan's career, for better or worse.
This
I
might
don't,
be my
did I say that
favorite
right?
M.
Shyamalan?
Night Shyamalan.
Shyamalan.
I think this might be my favorite M. Night Shyamalan
Yeah,
movie.
it's
Now that
most
I'm thinking
people's,
about it,
because it's the only one that really makes a whole lot of sense.
that's also very true. And, in fifth grade, I was probably not that hard to impress when it comes to movies.
No,
So it holds up, though.
I was impressed with it. The whole, like, really impressed with it. It was fantastic. Um, on this day, October 5th, 1999, the Ladbroke Grove rail crash in West London killed 31 people.
Awful.
Also during the same week, on October 2nd, number 21 University of Alabama football team beats number 3 Florida 40-39 in a huge overtime upset to snap the Gators' 30-game home winning streak. Future Seattle Seahawks running back Sean Alexander crosses for 4 touchdowns for the Crimson Tide. So I am not a big sports fan. I take it this is like one of those games that people all remember and talk about.
I somehow remember this game. My dad was watching it and screaming. And I mean, the fact that a number 21 team beat a number 3 team is
Yeah, and that
hugely
40 to
significant.
39, that's so close, like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I
Insanity.
understand why it would be exciting. I just am
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Uh, on October 3rd, the St. Louis Cardinals first baseman Mark McGwire hits his 65th homer of the season in a rain-shortened 9-5 win over the Chicago Cubs at Busch Stadium. This clinches McGwire's second straight home run title over Sammy Sosa of the Cubs, who hits his 63rd home run in the same game.
Now,
So
is that something you paid attention to, the McGuire Sosa home run race?
I don't know if paid attention is the right word. It was inescapable.
Yeah.
Every time you like looked at a newspaper or television show or anything, like somebody would mention it,
Yeah.
and everybody was talking about it because they went back and forth, right? It was like one of them was the head home runs, then the other one, then the other one. They called it like the slug
Like
off,
slug.
or
Yep.
it
It
had a
was
name.
insane. If people aren't familiar with what we're talking about, in the summer, particularly of 99, McGuire and Sammy Sosa were basically vying to break Roger Maris's single season home run record that stood at 61 home runs. And it had been in place since the 1961 season. And I am a huge baseball nerd. And I remember that summer, anytime either the Cardinals or the Cubs were in Houston, we had to go and see if, McGuire or Sosa would hit a home run. And my brother and I, after this season, there was some special about it released on VHS, and we watched it so much that the tape got worn out. So this was a very important time for fifth grade me.
And there were a
Oh,
lot of
man.
conversations going on around it about use of steroids
Yes.
and doping in baseball and fairness and things like that.
If you ever feel like checking it out, Google Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa at the beginning of their careers and in 1999 and see how much their
Muscle
bodies
mass?
changed. Yep, it's quite interesting.
Yeah. And
Anyway,
there were
this
a
is
lot
not
of
a
people.
baseball podcast.
No. But there were a lot of people at the time, I remember being like, I don't really care if baseball players use steroids as long as it's like whoever wants to uses them and then
Mm.
everybody's on them and then the game just gets more exciting in general.
Oh
And I was like,
gosh,
yeah, I
yeah.
kind of see your point.
Yeah.
If steroids weren't so harmful to your health,
Yeah.
then like, sure, like I want to see basically superhero athletes,
Yeah.
but
It's the
I mean,
influence
it's
on
dangerous.
young kids and young athletes
Yeah.
thinking that they have to, use steroids or HGH to even be competitive. But
Yeah.
boy,
It's
they
dangerous.
certainly they paid the consequences ultimately for that.
Yeah. Um God, this is a huge one. All right. On October 4th, 99, the single Breathe by Faith Hill is released. It would go on to become the Billboard Song of the Year for the year 2000 and to be played at school dances everywhere and every wedding I went to in the
Mhm.
2000s and on the radio constantly everywhere you went. This song was so big and beautiful and everybody was in love with Faith Hill. She was
Yeah.
like America's sweetheart for a little while there. And oh my God, this song. I forgot about it until I read the agenda and I was like, oh,
Right?
that's like the defining song. Seriously, I went to so many weddings between 99 and 2004. It was like that was the
Oh
age when
my
like all
gosh.
my friends got married. And that song was at every
I
wedding.
can't imagine. I think I had my first slow dance to this song in 6th grade. So
Yeah. Oh, that's
that's
so
a fun
cute.
one.
That's really cute. My first slow dance was to Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, and it
That's
has this
fantastic.
no, it's not. That's very my high school. Um, uh, or my middle school, both. But it's a really awkward song for a slow dance because there's like a kind of fast part in the middle,
The
and
guitar riff.
you're like, what do we do? And you sort of stop slow dancing and fast dance, and then you're like, oh, now we slow dance again. It's really awkward, especially when you're a
Oh,
teenager and you don't know what anything is.
that's so funny. Oh
um,
gosh.
on October 7th, 1999,
Ugh.
ugh, the the Cheeto,
Yeah.
at the time known primarily as a real estate tycoon, announced that he was considering a presidential run and forming an exploratory committee. He indicated he would enter the race for the Reform Party's nomination. And if you don't know who I'm talking about when I say the Cheeto, I'm surprised you listen to this podcast. All right.
Yeah.
Um, on October 8th, a year after former Chilean dictator's arrest in London, God, this was huge news in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spain's
Oh, I
request
forgot to
for
put
his
his name.
extradition. You mean Pinochet?
No Shay. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting given the guest star in this episode.
I know.
Because he had to flee Chile because of Pinochet.
Yeah.
Spain's request for his extradition on charges of torture continues to move through the British legal system. This was in the paper like every day, like the legal
Mm.
machinations and arguments on both sides. And as a law student at the time, studying like international legal systems, it was fascinating, just fascinating to
Mhm.
listen to. I didn't ever want to go into this kind of law, but it was like, I guess for what other people is like watching sports. I was like, oh, I'm on Team Spain. Let's see what
That makes
happens. Yeah.
That's how I felt, I think, following the litigation in the Supreme Court against the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I was hooked.
At
Good
this
times.
time, I think there was also some European prosecution of Microsoft for
Ooh.
antitrust violations, and I was taking. Wait, what year is this? 99. Yeah, I was taking
Mhm.
antitrust law that semester
That's
and
perfect
obsessed with
timing.
antitrust law. And the Microsoft case was like working its way through the EU system, and I was like, they've got it coming. I think monopolies and the failure of our government and many world governments to persecute monopolization and unfair trade practices has gotten us to the situation we're in now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me, I just want to say something about politics, and not in the specific, but in the general, that sometimes my political views and Kara's political views come through in our conversations. Sometimes the show has things happening that just read on politics, and this has been true of every show I've podcasted about. Also, as a feminist, I feel like I can't remove feminism from the way I look at any television show or
Yeah.
movie. If you don't like my politics and that bothers you, I'm not going to stop. I can't stop. It's part of who I am. So
This is probably not the podcast for you. I know we got a review way back when about what was it? We were too man-hatey or something.
yeah, and the person was clearly not who they said they were in their
Yeah.
review. They
And
just didn't like us
I
being
was
too
just like,
feminist.
I think we were actually talking about,
I think it was race. I think they were like, why do you
yeah.
have to bring race into everything? And I'm like, it's not everything, but
No,
sometimes.
I was like, but it was particularly relevant in that episode. Anyway,
I'm not
it's
going to like take
impossible.
my film degree, which was all about analyzing media for its messages about the human condition and society, and like put that
Mhm.
aside so that I don't offend somebody. Like, it's just not, I can't do it. It's not
Oh,
who I am.
it reminds me of the people right now, at this time Wicked came out recently, and people getting frustrated that others are quote unquote making Wicked political.
It's like, it's always been political.
Yep. I was like, so is The Wizard of Oz. Fun fact. But anyway,
Yeah,
it's just
anti-fascism is a huge part of The Wizard of Oz and
mhm.
Wicked, and it didn't start with the movie, it was in the play and it was in the book.
Yeah.
So, if you think somebody recently made Wicked political, um uh, I don't know what to tell you about your past viewing of the play.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
you weren't apparently in the right theater.
and TV shows are art, and art is inherently political by nature. So here we are.
Yeah.
This is going to inevitably come up during our coverage of the podcast. And I know Jim and Sam, our co hosts who will be joining us in future episodes, do not feel any differently.
Mhm.
So you're
Exactly.
warned.
And you know what? If something that we say you disagree with, but you want to make your point, like, write to us or call us and we'll engage with you on it. Like, that's actually
Always.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear somebody refute the substance rather than being like, I don't want you to talk about politics.
Yeah. Keeping an
Uh,
open mind and
yeah,
open dialogue is beneficial sometimes.
yeah. And for the most part, I'd like to stick to sort of political ideas and theory and not get into like nitty-gritty details about current day.
Yeah.
Um, like, monopolies are bad. All right.
Oh, jeez.
That said, let's get into it because this episode is really light and fun,
Yeah.
and such a great way to dive back into this fantastic series and revisit, these
Mm.
characters that we love so much. So you'll notice that we don't have Cordelia anymore. She's gonna show
Aw.
up later on Angel. And it's just the core Scoobies, and we meet some new characters.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So let's see. We meet Eddie, played by the absolutely fantastic, beloved
Pedro.
internet daddy of Pedro Pascal that we all love so much. And I pulled out a little sound clip.
Poor Eddie.
Wow, sorry.
No, I wasn't looking.
Did you, lose your way?
Me? Oh, no, I'm just going to Fisher Hall, which I know is on the Earth planet. Recently voted most pathetic, uh-huh.
Well, I'm lost, and I have a map, so...
Oh, I come in second. I'm Buffy, by the way.
Eddie.
Okay,
They're so cute.
that scene is so adorable. Like, first of all, which I know is on the Earth planet, is so cute and so Buffy. And he's like, I have a map.
Mhm.
And he's so dorky. Is he wearing like a members only jacket? It's so
It
cute.
looks like it.
Which is funny. That's very retro in 99. That wasn't, I don't know when
Oh,
those came
yeah.
back, but I think they weren't back yet. I think that was ahead of its time. And it's so funny because he looks so different. He's so young and
Yep.
no beard. And,
Yeah.
more recent Pedro Pascal roles, he's always either scruffy or like
Yep.
super slick.
Yeah.
This like dorky college student version of Pedro Pascal, I don't think we've ever seen that anywhere else.
No. I didn't recognize him maybe until a rewatch a couple years ago, and it was the voice that did it. I was
Yeah.
watching, I had it on in the background while I was doing dishes, and I remember hearing the voice. I was like, hold on. And I looked, I was like, oh my gosh, he looks like a baby.
Yeah, he is a little baby. And he has
So
said
young.
in interviews and stuff that Buffy the Vampire Slayer kept him from being homeless, that
Yeah.
the residuals checks that he got for this one appearance were like sometimes the only way he was able to make rent for a few years, though. It's so funny to think of him being like a struggling actor because he's such a huge star
I
now.
know.
I just saw
So
Gladiator
prominent.
2,
Oh, I can't
and
wait.
his role in that is not what I thought it was going to be going in. I did the thing I always do, which is I didn't see any trailers for that movie. I just went to it. And so in my head, I expected like the three actors that I knew, him, Joseph Quinn, and Paul Mescal, and even Denzel
Mhm.
Washington. I
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
expected them all to, I had ideas about what their characters would be. And
Yeah.
with one exception, I was 100% wrong. Um, the
It's fun.
the movie is really beautifully made. It's a real spectacle, and I would
I
suggest
need to
seeing it on the
go.
big screen. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's definitely a glorification of violence. It's definitely a very violent movie, but
Yeah.
it's still really, really entertaining and beautiful and well made. And I think there's going to be a third one.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that sounds fun.
Anyway, so Pedro Pascal, we meet Eddie, and then Buffy also meets, some new professors. We meet her intro to psych professor, Maggie Walsh. She's the only professor we get a name of, so we know she's a character we have to follow.
Mhm.
T.A. Riley, who in the bookstore scene is wearing the most boring outfit I've ever seen.
But I mean, that's kind of Riley.
Exactly. I
You
was like, oh,
know?
look how they dressed Riley to tell you not to pay attention to him.
Yeah.
But whenever you learn a character's name, that's how you know you have to pay attention going forward.
Yep.
And
He's just this good
yeah.
old boy from, corn-fed from Iowa.
Yeah, he's very cute.
He is.
And we'll see more of him. And we meet Kathy, Buffy's roommate.
I love Kathy. Oh my gosh, she's so special.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm so glad they put me with somebody cool. I can tell you're cool. I can just tell we're
As
gonna have
she's
so much fun.
unfurling a Celine Dion poster.
Yeah. And
It's like,
the look on
aw.
Buffy's face is like,
It's like,
don't
what
say
have I
anything.
done?
Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Yeah, Kathy has a great moment later too when they're all in Buffy's room trying to figure out where she is, and Kathy's like, I specifically said stable, non-smoker.
Oh yeah.
It
Oh.
it really brought the early parts of college back to me, especially the filling out the roommate form.
Oh
I
gosh,
put
yes.
hours into the roommate form. Like I
So much
thought
thought.
so deeply about what I wanted in a roommate and how, how that relationship would be. And then I got assigned a single. And I always thought like they were like, nobody
Oh.
can live with this girl. Like
Terrible. Oh, I wish I could have had a single, but mine worked out okay. It wasn't too bad.
yeah,
Oh,
there's
goodness.
pluses and minuses to having a single. The first few weeks of school, it was a little bit like, I don't even know who to start to hang out with,
Aw.
because your roommate is
Yeah,
like your default buddy if you don't know anyone else. But
definitely.
I saw enough roommate disaster pairings to be real happy to have a single after that.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
This is such a good episode at capturing kind of the struggles of adjusting to college life. It's like the entire episode, there's, that ongoing theme of the unfamiliar and the unknown and Buffy's discomfort. Poor Buffy. It's like
And the
everything that
phrase,
could go wrong does go wrong for
did
her.
you lose your way, right? Eddie says it to her, and
Yes.
then Sunday says it to Eddie, and Buffy has kind of lost her way at
Yeah.
first. She's insecure about starting college, and it is big and overwhelming. I mean, that walk through the plaza or the quad or whatever that was, where everyone's yelling and handing out flyers.
So stressful.
Yeah, and I was like, oh God, I remember that feeling of like,
Yep.
I can't possibly do 37 extracurricular activities, but everyone seems to think that I should, you know?
Yep. And all the parties immediately. The creepy guy, like free Jello shots for freshman women, gave me some really horrible flashbacks. I was like, oh no, run away,
Yeah.
Buffy.
Yeah.
Run
Uh,
away.
Although of anyone, well, Buffy's already been to a frat party like that
That's true.
in
That went
season
so
2.
well.
Yeah, so I'm sure she knows better than to take a drink from a college boy that she doesn't know
Mhm.
after that experience. But I love that Willow is so on top of everything, because
Yeah.
I remember those people who were
Yep.
like, it's like, have you done this before? How do you know how to do all the stuff already?
Right. And it's such a nice contrast, right, to Buffy kind of floundering to the point where, classes aren't quite going her way. Her roommate is questionable. Giles is even unfamiliar and not as focused on her anymore. And even her slang game is
And her
kind of
mom.
off. Yeah, poor Joyce, putting all these crates in Buffy's room, and then Buffy watches Willow and Oz seemingly adapting without any issues, and she must have felt, so isolated in that moment. And I think everyone who went to college, even without going to college, being in a new situation, a new social situation, and having to adjust, can relate to this episode
Yeah.
because
It's
I just
overwhelming when you go somewhere new and you don't know what to expect, and other people do seem to be fitting in. That, like, if
Mhm.
Willow had also been like, yeah, it's so overwhelming, Buffy would have been a lot happier and felt more confident. I think the
Yeah.
added layer of, but it's so easy for some other people,
Yeah.
was making it worse for her. Like, she's like,
Mm.
maybe the only thing I'm good at is slaying. And then
Oh,
to lose a fight and have to run, she
yeah.
took a real hit to her
Kind of like
self-esteem.
with her tail in between her legs, running away. And
Yeah.
she even looks to Willow for that, kind of camaraderie of being overwhelmed when they find each other during the opening flyers scene, and it's like Willow cuts Buffy off and talks about how amazing it is that there are so many flyers and activities, and Buffy makes that comment. What does she say? She's like, some would say a little too much, like there's a little too much going
Yeah.
on, and Willow is just like through the roof about all of these causes that she now cares deeply about. And I will say I will say that Buffy and Willow talking about the flyers that they got, and Buffy bringing up Jello shots, and then Willow says, I'll trade you for a Take Back the Night flyer. I was like, of course this was written by Joss.
Yeah.
Like, that was so icky to me. I was like, great,
Yeah.
cool, good job, Joss. And I think the cold open to this episode we didn't really talk about.
Oh, where they're talking about their classes. Yeah.
Yes. And she's like, Buffy and Willow are both blissfully unaware of the vampire waking up behind them, meanwhile talking about, staying on top of things and paying attention. I love that we see this guy see all of the Slayer weapons sitting next to them and actually make the choice to just walk away.
Yeah. He's
And I was
like,
like, oh, he's smart.
Yeah, that's like one of the smartest vampires that the show's ever had. To
Yep.
be like, that person looks dangerous to me. I'll just
Oh,
go the other direction.
very smart
I
guy.
I loved that. And then for a minute I thought he was one of Sunday's lackeys, but it's not. It's a
Oh,
completely different vampire. I was
that
like,
would have
"Oh,
been
look, he
nice.
did make a smart choice," but no.
Oy.
Uh I love when Buffy's like, "The modern novel?" So I'd have to read the modern novel.
Yeah.
The reading load in college was
Oh
intense.
gosh, yeah.
And I did not pursue an English major
Mm.
because I was like, I don't think I can keep up with the reading. Like, there's so much reading for English majors and philosophy majors and history majors. I was like,
Oh yeah.
it's just too much reading. And I am a reader. I love reading. But
Yeah.
I was like, I'll
It's
never
like
keep
all
up
I
with it.
did in college. I did, because I was English and political science. So all I did was read
Read,
and
read,
write
read.
papers.
Yeah.
But I loved that. That was I played to my strengths, thankfully. And I took Geology 101 in addition to Psych. So when she said that, I was like, hey,
Yeah. I
I
think
like them
people
both.
are kind of mean about geology. Like,
I
I
know.
it's the butt of the joke in a lot of TV shows, like, oh, that rocks for jocks and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it's actually really fascinating science. Once
Is.
you get past the like initial parts of it, you get into like how the Earth was actually like created, and I,
Yep.
I I find it fascinating. I have a friend who has a geology podcast called Geology Bites. And
Ooh,
every now and then I listen to it, even though I don't understand most of what he's saying. I'm like, oh,
that's
so
fun.
interesting.
Ugh.
He takes the most interesting trips. He's always like, oh, I'm going to the mountains of Peru to look at this deposit of ore that's unusual. I'm like, what?
That's fun.
Yeah, really
Oh, I
interesting.
love it.
All right, so Buffy gets to college. They have the whole conversation about the library. I love that scene because that library has been in so many movies and TV
I
shows.
know.
I was like, "Oh, I've been in this room so many times." It's UC San Diego is where they film UC Sunnydale, I think. And that library, I specifically remember it being in Teen Wolf 2 with Jason Bateman.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
But it's been in a bunch of movies, like a lot of movies that are set at a college. You'll be like, there it is again. Like it's that
Nice.
ceiling is so distinctive.
I do love that quip when they walk in. Like Willow is in awe, and Buffy says, "This is a great place, or this is great if we ever need a place for the Nuremberg rallies."
Yeah.
And I love that line, but at the same time, like it's very intelligent, it's witty. And then this is the same Buffy who later on, when Xander says reconnaissance, confuses it with the Renaissance.
Yeah.
I was just like, Buff, come on.
Although
I
she
can't.
does, to be fair, she's like,
It's been a long
it's
week.
been a really hard week.
True.
That is
That
one of my
saves it a
favorite
little bit.
Buffy Xander moments, actually, because usually Xander's the one who's like kind of
Oh
a
yeah.
dope, and it's just part and parcel of Buffy just being off her game this week. That she's
Xander,
like
it's
when people
true.
paint and sculpt and stuff, and he's
I
like,
know.
the look on his face is like, "Who are you? And what did
I
you
know.
do to Buffy?"
It's so cute. Xander does, Xander kind of saves the day
Yeah, he
in
really
this
comes through.
episode.
Right,
He
first of
builds her
all,
up.
he totally validates her and is like, "Yeah, let's," what does he say? "Let's Avengers with the assembling," or something
Oh
like that.
yeah.
Like, he's like, "Yeah, let's do it," because he's not going to college, right? So he's not distracted and overwhelmed and subsumed into this college world, and so he's ready to just pick
Mhm.
up where they left off. I don't know what to make of his whole "I spent the summer washing dishes at a strip club" story.
I
And the
know.
fact that he stripped one night apparently and will never tell anyone about it, except he told her about it, so he clearly wants people to know. I
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that story. I'm like, I'm gonna pretend it didn't happen."
That's it. And I like his line, where he's kind of restoring her confidence a bit and says, if I'm all alone and I'm scared or freaked out, I think, what would Buffy do? You're my hero. And I'm like, oh, sweet. And then it's immediately followed up with his creepy ass line about, and sometimes when it's dark and I'm all alone, I think, what is Buffy wearing? I was like, all right,
Yeah.
man. It did kind of remind me of like a Chandler Bing-esque
Yeah,
humor as a defense mechanism. Like, okay, we're getting a little serious here. I need to
yeah.
lighten the
But
mood. But I was
it's
like,
just
come
so
on, man.
Xander to like
Yeah.
find a way to sexually objectify Buffy. And
Yep.
she's like, can that be something you never ever tell me about?
Yep.
And I feel like that is something I have said to guy friends before. Like, you
Yeah.
know what? We don't need to share everything. That's a
It's like,
thing
that's a
I don't
inside
need to
thought
talk to you about.
that does not need to come out of your mouth.
I never need to know about that. You could just
Yep.
like I've had friends who've dated other friends of mine and tried to tell me things about the friend because that they knew because they dated them and I'm like, I don't want to
Eh,
know. I really don't like
it's like not my business.
that's information that's going to really alter my friendship with the other person. Mm-mm, don't tell me.
Yeah. And with poor Xander, like Buffy has already heard the thoughts in his head. She knows exactly where
Yeah.
that was going.
And he's said stuff like this all along. So
Yeah.
and he does a good job of sort of passing that stuff off as a joke, but the consistency of it is creepy.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know if this were not a TV show, if I had a friend who consistently said stuff like that about like to me, who I wasn't
Yeah.
interested in return, I don't know if we'd still be such good friends.
It made me realize how many guy friends I had like that in middle school, high school, college. Like almost every close guy friend I had, I can think of saying something sexualizing or kind of off in that way to me. And I remember growing up thinking that was
Normal.
normal.
Yeah.
And
Well, because it
now,
was portrayed everywhere around us in
oh
the
yeah,
media. God, that was just like
that's true.
guy humor. And I times are changing, and this is one of the ways that the show is dated. Is I don't think Xander as a character could be in a 2024 show.
That's
They
true.
they would have to change a lot of his like behavior towards women.
Mm. Like if a platonic male friend said that to me now, it would be an entirely different story. She's like, mm-mm,
Yeah.
nope.
Gross. Gross.
Oh, Xander.
Yeah. Xander.
But good job on building up your friend and giving her support.
Yeah, and I
I
love
do
that they
love
do the
that.
research by like breaking into some
Yes.
office. Like they're such little criminals when they need to be, and I'm so there for it. And
Precious.
the scene where she's talking about kids disappearing and he's like, what year? And then he's like, magic number, and they have the article. I love that
Yeah.
scene. I'm like, I love it when the research comes together. But
Yep. They
there's a
got their
part of me,
flow back.
yeah, there's a part of me also that can't help being like, it's so convenient how things are summarized for them when they do their research. She's like,
I
oh,
know.
there's not very many disappearances before 82. Like, you looked before 82, did you, at all the
Yeah.
files? Yeah. Um, it's just it's TV magic. That's how it works. But every now and then there's a part of me that's like, like I feel
I
like
know.
a real nerd when I do that. Like that's not how it
It's
would really go.
That's easy to do in some of these college episodes where it's like
Yeah.
apparently there's only one professor that teaches Psych 101 and only
Yeah.
one class. Like it's just little things like that. Suspension of disbelief. We gotta
Yeah.
ignore it.
The campus is like conveniently huge and tiny depending on
Yep.
the story needs. It's, it's a fantasy world. um, I
Oh,
um
man.
I love Olivia. I wish that we would get more of her.
I
She's
know.
she's so like I don't know, there's something so offhand about her when Buffy finds her in Giles' house and she's like, is this blue cheese or cheese that's gone blue? I'm like, okay, that's a great line. And
Yeah.
also you're like wearing a men's shirt, like you look so casually, effortlessly sexy in it. And
Uh-huh.
then she just sort of like takes the whole Buffy thing in stride and she
She
calls
just
Rupert
stands
Ripper.
there. Yep.
Yeah.
Doesn't try to cover up or anything. And I love that line. What did she say? Like, let me go slip into something less comfortable.
Yeah.
Ugh. Ugh.
I think I've used that line actually. And I think I've used it recently to mean like, oh, I'll put on my outdoor clothes.
I'm team no pants when I'm at
Yeah.
home and other people are not in my home.
Yeah. You don't need to wear pants at home by yourself or
Nope.
with some people that you love.
That's true. Giles continues to have fantastic taste in music.
Yeah.
Playing a little David Bowie in the background makes me happy.
It
Like,
just
oh.
also makes
Ripper.
me more than ever want a Ripper spinoff show.
I know.
They could still have Anthony Stewart Head in it, like doing like narration or something, and then have some
Mhm.
young actor playing Ripper, and I,
Mm.
so many people would watch that.
Yeah, sign me up
Yeah.
for sure.
So the fact that Olivia knew him as Ripper tells me that she's a person who can like just roll with the flow.
Yeah,
Like,
she can hang.
yeah, she's cool. And his whole like, I'm not supposed to have a private life. And then Buffy's like, no,
Yes,
because you're very old and it's gross, is
I
so
love that.
funny because it makes me remember that he slept with Joyce
I know.
and Buffy knows about it.
Poor Joyce. She's just like, damn it, Giles. Like, I'm supposed to be able to pretend you don't have sex. You are not a sexual being. And meanwhile, 35-year-old me is like, ooh, Giles looks nice in that robe. Like,
Yeah.
he looks good.
I like
But
more casual Giles. Like, season
yeah,
1, season 2 of Buffy, and season 3, he was always in like suits and stuff.
so much tweed.
And now that
So
he is,
much.
as they say on the show, a gentleman of leisure, he's dressing casually, and it's very attractive.
It does make me happy too, like that reaction and that dynamic between Buffy and Giles. It is so clear cut that they have what's akin to a father-daughter relationship. There is nothing else there. It is age appropriate.
Yeah.
It's just, I was like,
He
okay, good.
never, ever, ever sexualizes her in any way whatsoever.
Never.
And it's
We
because
love
even
Giles.
Wesley didn't sexualize Buffy, but his thing for Cordelia just sort of introduced a icky vibe.
Yeah.
It was
So
like,
creepy.
ugh. Um,
Oh,
but Giles always appropriate, always,
yeah,
always, and yet still fascinating and sexy.
it's true. Good job, Giles.
Yeah. All right, we got to talk about the two best parts of the episode. Pedro Pascal, who we've mentioned already a little bit, and Sunday,
Oh, Sunday.
who's one of my all-time favorite Buffy vampires.
Bloody Sunday.
She's so mean and she's so snarky
Mm-hmm.
and she's so like stylish and beautiful. She had amazing hair.
Oh
And
yeah. That was so peak
yeah,
90s.
yeah,
Perfect.
could not have been better. Her like group of lackeys, like especially the stoner lackey. Oh, I love that guy.
It was great.
Oh,
And-
I've got a clip, of course.
Hey, check it out.
Well, do we have a Klimt? Yes.
Big score for Clint. Monet still well in the lead, but look out for Team Klimt coming from behind.
Freshmen, man, they're so predictable.
And you can never eat just one.
That's so good. I love the keeping track.
The Klimt versus Monet.
Yes.
Oh my God, because it's so true.
So
So
accurate.
there were these companies that would show up on campus like the first week or so of college, and it would be like in whatever big outdoor space there was, and there'd be all these huge racks of posters, and you could flip through them. And everybody bought posters for their dorm rooms from these people. And so then you'd go around campus, and there was like, I don't know, like 6 posters that you would see in everybody's room. It was Blues
Yeah.
Brothers, Klimt, Monet, Georgia O'Keeffe. I had a Georgia O'Keeffe. Those are the ones that I remember the best. Oh, Scarface. There was a lot of Scarface posters.
It's like when I went to college, it was a ton of Pulp Fiction and Fight Club, particularly for guys.
Yeah.
Breakfast at Tiffany's all over the place for women.
Yeah.
And Marilyn Monroe. For whatever reason, those were super common. And then throw in like a few Van Gogh
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah.
And it's so funny
be
how
classy.
that happens. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. You got different vibes. And then like Cheech and Chong. I
Yep.
still remember quite a few Cheech and Chong posters.
Yeah. That's how you identify the other stoner kids. If they have
I
a
had a
Blues
Cheech
Brothers
and Chong.
poster, a Cheech and Chong
Like,
poster.
my dad let us watch all sorts of movies growing up, like a lot of National Lampoons and Cheech and Chong. And me at 15 had a Cheech and Chong poster along with Stand By Me and Harry Potter in my room, having never tried pot at that
Yeah.
point.
Of course not,
So
but that's a really funny combination.
yeah. Thanks, Dad. For sure.
God, so funny. That reminds me, we didn't talk about it at the top of the episode, but the Harry Potter book coming out during this time, I didn't jump on the Harry Potter bandwagon until that fall when I was interviewing for law firm jobs. And I was like, I need to have something that I can read that's really light and easy to read, so
Yeah.
a YA book. And
Yeah.
and everybody was reading Harry Potter. I was living in New York City. I was taking the subway every day, and the subway was like Bibles and Harry Potter as far as the
That's
eye
so
could see.
funny.
So many Bibles, lots of people reading the Bible on the subway, but also lots of people reading Harry Potter. And so I remember it so clearly. I got the first 2 books were out in paperback at that point. So I got those and I was reading those in between all my law firm interviews. And then the
Aw.
3rd book came out in October, but I waited and I bought it right before Thanksgiving to read over Thanksgiving. It was like my
Nice.
treat. And I read it
Oh,
like on the Amtrak home for Thanksgiving,
that's so
along with
fun.
like 90 other people. There was like Harry Potter books
Jeez.
on the train as well. Yeah.
Can't imagine. That's how it was like for swim team that summer. It was just everyone was reading Harry Potter while we were waiting for our races everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Aw. It was before
So
we
popular.
knew things about J.K. Rowling that I wish we
We
didn't.
didn't know. Yeah.
Yep.
I just so wish Sunday could have ever interacted with Spike.
I know.
I'm so sad that she was a 1-episode vampire because she's so
Ugh.
funny.
She's like almost, I mean, she's akin to a female version of Spike. There's that sass and a little bit of like punk edge to her,
Yeah.
and she's intelligent, clearly. And she's just fun.
Yeah, she's fun.
Fun to watch.
It was a perfect introduction to the season, though, because the episode overall is pretty light. There's no big bad. There's no overarching mystery yet. It's really just about readjusting to college with, this little vampire twist. And when Buffy does finally regain her courage and her bravado and her mojo, or whatever you want to call it, the fight that she has with Sunday and her gang is fantastic. It's so fun.
So good.
And then when she's like, I think when in the 3 seconds it takes you to turn to dust, you'll find the mistake was touching my stuff.
And I love the way Sarah Michelle Gellar played it, because like, when she's still finding her footing and she, poor thing, crashes through the skylight, basically DoorDash for the vampires below, delivering a slayer directly to them. Her dialogue, like, Buffy is known for her quippy one-liners, and even that was off at first. Like when she says, you got a nice setup here, but you made one mistake, and she's all serious. And when Sunday asks her what was that, and she tails off, she's like, well, I'm not actually positive, but statistically speaking, people usually, and then she gets kicked in the face. That was perfectly executed by the two of them, and it plays more into Buffy trying to find her footing and just being off. And I love when you see her finally get like that oomph back after Sunday breaks her class protector award, which is infuriating.
A step too far for sure.
And then it's like Buffy's back. That seems to be what finally clicks for her and motivates her, and then she's back to getting those sassy one-liners out and landing punches. But this is one episode
when she's like, I don't remember what Sunday says, but then when Buffy goes, I think I'll answer that with a headbutt. It's one of my favorite Buffy lines ever.
Yes,
it's so great.
Good. It's right after she breaks her arm. She's like, what if I break your arm? Or how about if I break your arm? And Buffy doesn't even flinch. She's like, you tell her, Buffy. Stay strong. But I will say,
like, arm's not broken. It's only hurt. Like,
This episode is one that did make me think, when people become vampires, do they just become embedded with some sort of inherent knowledge of martial arts and
Yeah.
training? Because all of them are so skilled, and specifically like, roundhouse kicks and spin kicks and all of this stuff. I mean, it looks very cool,
Yeah.
but this one, I don't know why, stood out a little bit more to me. I was like, these are very skillful fighters.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Sunday is a skillful fighter, but the fact that any of her lackeys are of
Like
any
this,
use whatsoever
yeah,
is surprising.
like that poor stoner guy. Just like, come on, man.
But when he's
But
like, he wants to have
whoa.
Buffy's blood because he thinks it'll be, whoa, like tie stick.
I stay. Yep, I didn't get that in 5th grade.
I'm glad that you did not, but it
Yep.
means it's a type of weed that's supposed to be really, really great.
Now it's hilarious. I was like, oh, okay. I think I didn't get. There were a couple of lines in this episode, I guess I haven't seen it in a while, that finally landed
Oh,
for
that's good.
me, and I understood it. I was like, damn, I love that I can still pick up new things after having watched this so many times. But the tie stick line was definitely one of them. I was like, oh, haha.
Yeah. It has a lot of great moments with our side characters as well. Like when Xander goes to Buffy's dorm, and first of all, when he hugs Kathy and he's like, "I don't know you, do I?" is so funny.
Precious.
Yeah. But when he first comes in and he's like, "It's a prank. It's from Buffy's friends who sleep all day and have no tans."
So it's so clever.
Yeah.
It's like, good job, Zand.
Yeah.
That's a
very,
great way
very
to
well done.
communicate that.
The idea that Buffy would be able to maintain her secret identity with a roommate is ludicrous.
I know.
Like, there's no way Kathy doesn't eventually figure it out.
It's just insane. And she's already shown us that she's pretty observant.
Yeah.
She doesn't really miss anything. And I do love, it's pretty diabolical the way that Sunday and her little cronies take all of Buffy's stuff and leave that note, just like she saw with Eddie.
Yeah.
That is that is a
That's
mind
psyops.
game.
Yeah.
Like that is insane.
And the look on Sunday's face when she thinks of it is like, I know what's gonna really throw her more off her game. Like she knows what she's doing. That's mean.
It
Like,
is
so
mean.
mean.
It's so good. And poor Eddie. Poor
Yeah.
Eddie. I
He
do
seemed like
love
such a sweetheart
I
with his
know. And
human bondage and everything.
I love Buffy's response to that. She's like, "Oh, I'm not really into porn." And then of course she's like, "Well, I don't want to make this guy feel bad." And then she said, "I'm just trying to cut way back."
Yeah.
And I like the reference to Mr. Pointy, which is, I don't really have a security blanket unless you count Mr. Pointy. That's a good callback. And the fact that she, in Eddie's things, sees his of human bondage security blanket book, and that is how she processes that this was not intentional. There's no way he would have left that behind. She's got good Slayer instincts still.
Yeah.
Ugh, poor Eddie.
And that nobody really Giles is like, and she didn't even try to tell Willow and Oz about Eddie and what she found. Although there's that great moment when she's looking for him in class, and Willow's like, "Oh, you made a friend."
She's so
Thanks, Mom.
Willow. Yeah, Willow's just loving life, which makes sense. It makes sense that Willow would just kind of fit in seamlessly.
Well, and she has her on-campus boyfriend, which, Buffy didn't remember to pick one of those up.
That was so cute.
The line's probably really long.
I do like how Riley isn't immediately enthralled with Buffy. She doesn't make a great impression. She obviously knocks a bunch of books on his head, and when she says, "I am nice to meet," and is just kind of stumbling all over herself, and she calls Buffy Willow's friend.
Oh, I love
really
that.
love that, right? Like, it's so nice because typically we know that Willow and everybody that's close with Buffy is kind of used to almost being second fiddle to her.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're the
And it's just,
sidekicks.
oh, it's nice
And it's
to
also part of like
see.
Buffy's, what we now call main character energy, right? She
Mm-hmm.
is the main character of the show, but she also within the story, she's the middle of everything that happens around the slaying and her social group. And for her
Yeah.
to be like shoved into this sidekick role is part of this whole experience for her where she feels like I'm not up to being whatever I need to be for this. And
Mm.
she has the revelation at the end of the episode that it's a lot like high
Yeah.
school, and then of course she says, "So I know what to expect," which is we're all supposed to understand that that's like, "Ha ha,
Yep.
you don't know what's coming for you." Yeah.
So I do have a question that
Yeah.
maybe you can help because, and I didn't Google this, I will
Mm.
admit, but how did Sunday and her gang get into Buffy's dorm without an invitation? Did Kathy let them in? Did the tunnels somehow lead to her closet and it's like a roundabout way of avoiding having to get an invitation? Because I'm pretty sure slight spoiler alert, in future episodes, you have to be invited. It's just like somebody's house.
I
So how did
don't
they get
know
around that? Is it because
because
nobody was there?
no, that
Like
doesn't usually do it.
I
I think
couldn't
Spike is
wrap my
able to
brain
get
around it.
in without an invitation.
Hmm.
Um Later, there might be some kind of dorm exception. I don't know. We should keep an eye on that
Yeah. I made a note and I was like, hold up.
because not only were they able to get into Buffy's room, they've been getting into people's rooms and
Right?
taking their stuff for like years. So maybe dorms don't count, but that's
That doesn't make any sense to me.
like, and I was never 100% clear on whether Faith's motel room had the counted as like a residence that a vampire needed an invitation to or not, because
Yeah.
Angel just goes in there one time, and I think in the very first Faith episode
They
the
attack her.
vampire attacks her at her motel room. So I
Mhm.
think that there's some really stupid lines about,
Yeah.
sorry, but about what counts and doesn't count as somebody's
Yeah.
home, because
Well,
I would think it would be anywhere somebody lives if it's magic, right?
right.
It can tell if you live there.
Well, and I think and you probably are like this way too, my legal brain takes over for what
Mm.
would count as burglary of a habitation,
Yeah.
where you are living, no matter how brief, like if you're in an RV or living in your car and that is your home, that would count, I would think. But that's not necessarily the rules in a fictional vampire universe.
So,
So I
like,
don't know.
let's fast forward to the zombie apocalypse when everybody's living in like Home Depot and malls and sports arenas and stuff. Do
Yeah.
vampires just have a free for all if they're not living in like typical houses?
Oh, what a nightmare.
Can
Right?
vampires enter an apartment building but not the individual apartments?
Yeah, like common grounds, the common areas. Can they go in, or is it because it's temporary housing? Like that doesn't make any sense. Can they go into an orphanage?
Oh,
An
God.
old-fashioned orphanage, like,
What about a monastery? We know that
oh, yeah.
the angel like killed a whole bunch of nuns one time. Did he go to like a abbey and like because it's like a
Yeah,
house of God, anyone can get in? I don't know.
right? Or like a summer camp,
Oh
like a
God.
cabin.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now I
These will
need
never be answered, but I need to know.
also now I need to have an angel versus Jason Voorhees movie. Where
That'd
it's
be
like a
fun.
vampire attacks the summer camp and then Jason Voorhees is like, "No, this is my summer camp to attack."
That's right. It's like, you can't, I get to kill them. You don't. That's not how this works. Oh, gosh. I can't.
A couple of things I just have to say. The dorm room that Buffy lives in is ridiculously big.
I know.
That's
Actually,
like the size of an apartment I had one time. It's
mm,
huge.
it is really big. I think I got lucky. Our dorms you had to live on campus the first 3 years at my college, and our dorms were gigantic. But I quickly learned how abnormal that was when I visited my other friends at school. But Buffy, like, everything's updated
Yeah.
and not chipped. There's no chipped paint. They have these giant, nice walk-in closets. Like, it's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
I would have
Pretty
loved
nice setup.
that dorm room. My first 2 dorm rooms were tiny. I think they were like 6 by 10, like the size of a jail cell.
Gosh. Yeah.
They were exactly the width of the bed. Like if you turned the bed, on the short wall of the room, it took up the whole. That was the
Oh
exact
my
width.
gosh.
Um,
Woo.
and there was, just room for the horribly ugly desks that they still have. I was at reunion in June. It's the exact same furniture.
Oh my gosh.
And a dresser and this really hideous overhead light that was like you felt
Oh,
like you were
the
being like interrogated by
awful
by
fluorescence.
like Soviet Union. Um yeah, so whenever I see a dorm room in a TV show and there was room to have like a whole yoga class in the middle of that room. It was huge. I'm
That's
like
true.
so jealous. I'm like, God, my room was so small. But there was also something great about how like cozy, because a lot of the dorm rooms at Vassar were small, and we all squished in there anyway. It was fine.
I feel like that'd be a good bonding experience. Like, and my experience at my school was also not quite normal. Like, the dorms were nice, but ours were definitely the bit, like, we had a balcony
Wow.
where we had like chairs and a setup. And yeah, I am now very thankful for that, because I did not realize how spoiled we were at
Yeah.
all.
Whenever I'm at one of my college reunions, one of the topics of conversation is always how pretty crappy the dorms are, and
Aw.
how all of us are like, yeah, I couldn't do this as an adult. Like living in this room when I was 18 was fine, but
Mm.
this is not sustainable as an adult. It's just too gross. Like
It's like a teeny studio apartment in New York or something.
yeah,
Just
just
what it would remind me of now.
um but yeah, they're great for reunion because you're only there 2 nights. It's just long enough to have the nostalgia,
Aw.
and also just long enough to start remembering, oh, that's right, these beds are awful. So you
Funny.
get the perfect amount of the dorm rooms, and then you're back out of there.
Ugh. And I love we see Buffy dealing with Kathy's snoring and laughing in her sleep, which is
Mhm.
something my roommate used to do, and it scared the hell out of me.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Like, and she would also sit up in the middle of the night and start like kind of speaking gibberish, and that was an adjustment for sure. But then I coughed throughout most of the year in the night, so we were even. It was fine.
Yeah. And you get used to it. There's something really valuable about learning to live with someone and all of their
Mhm.
little, like,
Quirks.
particular quirks, because
Yeah.
nobody in life is going to be 100% not annoying. Like, nobody.
That's true. Especially if you
So,
spend that much time with them.
yeah. I mean, I had to share rooms with my siblings growing up, so I feel like the fact that I had a single in college was almost like a karmic reward.
Oh yeah,
Like, oh, I finally have a room to myself. I love it.
that's fair. That seems justified. If anybody deserved a single, that would definitely be you. It's just like, oh, peace, quiet.
Exactly.
Oh,
uh, so a couple of other things. The song playing in the bronze is absolutely fantastic. It's called "You and Me" by the band Splendid. I couldn't find it on Apple Music, on iTunes to buy.
wow,
That band Splendid were also featured in season 2, episode 19, and season 5, episode 17.
nice.
They are a Dutch duo.
It felt very appropriate for
Yeah,
Buffy. Like, it fit in
it was
perfectly.
melancholy but like loungy, so just right for
Yeah.
the bronze. I was like, yeah. I think it's so funny to me that the bronze like remains a constant in Sunnydale, but like high school kids go there, but then now we're gonna start
I
seeing
know.
that college kids go there. It's so
It's for everyone,
but
except
it's also
for
not that big
adults.
and not that crowded. So
I know.
like Is it the only bar in Sunnydale? That can't be true. Like, there must be
There's
at least
no
one other
way.
bar. There's a coffee shop. We know there's a coffee shop.
Maybe there's like, a more distinguished bar or something that the other adults where Giles would fit in. Or like
Yeah.
a pub or something. Because thinking about the high school kids always constantly being in a place where alcohol is served and other adults are, it's like,
Yeah.
maybe not great.
It's not great.
Ugh,
But it was nice to see the bronze again. I love it.
it was nice. And Buffy finding, going back to somewhere that was familiar that really hadn't changed. And
Yeah.
being able to run into Xander there and kind of get back to feeling like herself was nice. And the audience too, it kind of reorients you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, we know this place. Like, we're used to the bronze.
Yeah.
And Xander being Xander, quoting what Phantom Menace and Scarface, dropping a little bit of wisdom on Buffy and getting it wrong eventually. She's
Yeah.
like, aw, this is familiar. We're back
Yeah.
to something that we know. And I do love too, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but Xander describing Buffy as being in a holding pattern when he's talking
Yeah.
to Willow and Oz. I was like, is that a callback to his Halloween spent as a soldier? He's just
Yeah.
still got some of that knowledge rattling around up there.
Little military knowledge. Yeah.
It's kind of nice.
Um, Buffy's final slay of Sunday is one of the all-time best
Oh,
Buffy slays. The way she spins
good.
that stake and then just like turns, and it's such a confident throw, and then she doesn't even
Mm-hmm.
watch her turn to dust, which
Yeah.
is the equivalent of like people walking away from an explosion and
Yeah.
not looking back. And her attitude about it, and it's like everything in that moment came together perfectly, and she's back to being
Mhm.
herself completely, and it's in the credits now. And I think that
So good.
that image of her twirling the stake might stay in the credits for like several more seasons.
Seems familiar.
It's
I
a
do.
really strong moment.
And I love how Sunday just kind of stands there, looks down at the stake with her hands on her hips
Yeah, that's
before she turns
Sunday.
to dust. Yep, she's like, damn it.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
And of course, Giles showing up to quote unquote save the day after everything's over. And I love his line and the way he delivers it when Buffy, he's like, I'm here. He gives you this whole big speech, like, I'm here to support you. And Buffy's like, okay, like, cool, basically. And she walks off and he's like, oh, the evil is this way?
Yeah.
Just like eager and ready to follow. He's so cute. It's
He
like,
is
oh,
cute.
buddy, you're precious.
I think it's weird that Xander wanted to steal all the stuff that was there, but we will see a little bit more of his living conditions in future episodes, and I don't know. Maybe he needs that rowing machine.
Yeah, rowing machines. Those are good, though. Not that cheap sometimes either. Oh, gosh. I think, too, Xander always is. I mean, he's the comic relief for the most part, so I feel like a lot of it was part of that. But imagine the things that they could find in that little hovel, basically.
Yeah.
All these belongings from students from 1982 on, they could probably solve a lot of disappearances
Yeah.
by what's in there. And I love Buffy's reaction to them reading her diary
Yeah.
too. Like, that does it. And then the girl trying on her skirt, and that's when she says they all deserve to die, like, we need to kill them all.
Yeah.
It's like, how dare she?
Well, the mistake she made was touching Buffy's stuff. And now we all know, don't touch Buffy's stuff.
No.
Like
and that
mm-mm.
comes up maybe in the next episode or two
Yeah.
as a theme.
Yeah, don't touch my stuff.
Buffy.
I mean, I know the feeling. I don't like it when
Yep.
people touch my stuff.
Mm-mm.
And if they take my stuff and lose it,
Oh,
not based on real events, yes, based on real events, it makes me really furious.
that's fair. That is really obnoxious. As I was rewatching it again this morning, and it's enjoyable episode, but I was thinking the whole time, I was like, this is definitely not my favorite season premiere of Buffy. And I know we talked about last season, season 3, episode 1, Anne is probably my least favorite premiere episode of the entire series. And I think that still stands. And this might be number 2,
I don't
unfortunately.
love the beginning of either 6 or 7, actually.
Really?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
parts of it's
6
more
is kind of jarring.
yeah, it's more the second episode of season 6 that I really don't like. And then the beginning of season 7 is just weird. Season 7 in general is a little bit like
Yeah.
uneven. I like this opening. I think it does a really good job of like resetting the scene and
Yes.
without being like super heavy or anything. Yeah, I like 3.1. 2.1 makes me really uncomfortable.
Ooh, that's a
And
special episode.
of course the first episode of the first season is, it's a pilot, it's its own special thing. It's like not even worth comparing
Yeah.
it to other season openers. But I love season 5 episode 1. Love
That one's so good.
love it.
That's the thing. I'm curious how if our opinions will change as we go through and rewatch them through a more analytical lens.
Yeah.
But I found myself already, I was just like, I don't want to compare too much because it's an entirely different season. It's an entirely new environment. But there is a lot about this episode that I like. And I think it does do a good job setting up the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And we can definitely talk about that a little bit more in our
In the
spoiler
spoiler section. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, before we get to spoilers, let's talk about some of the pop culture references that
Woohoo!
we heard in this episode.
Some not so pop, some just cultural. So the first one, we've got Oz saying it's pretty much a madhouse, which is, of course, a quote from Charlton Heston as Colonel George Taylor in the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. And Xander actually references this same line a couple seasons ago in When She Was Bad.
Buffy, when she's talking about the huge library, says, yeah, this is great. If we ever need a place for the Nuremberg rallies. Beginning in 1933, an area to the south of the German city of Nuremberg was turned into a gigantic building site. The, quote, party rally grounds were designed to be a stone memorial to the ideology of National Socialism, also known as Nazis. The Nazis held their annual party rallies here from 1933 to 38, at which point they developed at the rallies, they developed all of their anti-Semitic laws. It's an interesting choice for Buffy because it's not like she's a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine there's anything that would even imply that she's a Nazi. But
No.
It's just a statement about size, I think.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it worked. Next, we've got Riley talking about Professor Walsh and operant conditioning when they run into him in the library. And he says, her treatise on Dietrich's work. And we can only presume that Professor Walsh must have written her own treatise based on Dietrich von Freiberg's treatise of the intellect and the intelligible, written in the late 13th century. And operant conditioning is conditioning in which the desired behavior or increasingly closer approximations to it are followed by a rewarding or reinforcing stimulus. So you think of basically, Pavlov's dogs and ringing the bell and giving a treat, that type of thing.
Like, I have trained Pixel that if he stays in his cat bed next to the computer while I'm podcasting, afterward he gets TREATS.
Aw.
Can't say the word out loud because he'll react. Kathy hangs a Celine Dion poster on the wall. Celine Dion is a popular singer of sappy love songs. Her most famous song, of course, is My Heart Will Go On from the 1997 movie Titanic.
over and over and over again. I played that song. Then we've got, of course, Eddie mentioning his security blanket book of human bondage, and of human bondage was written by W. Somerset. Is that Maugham?
It's
Maugham?
Mom. It's just
Mom.
Mom.
Thank you. I was like, this is a blind spot for me when it comes to literature. I had never heard of this book, actually. It was originally published in 1915 and is a classic tale of sexual obsession and man's hunger for freedom.
I've always meant to read it after hearing of it in this show, and I've never gotten around to it. Maybe
We could
this
do a
is the
Buffy
year.
book club eventually.
The Stoner Vamp, regarding the artwork they have collected from dorms, says, Monet's still well in the lead, but look out for Team Klimt coming in from behind. Claude Monet, 1840 to 1926, was a French landscape painter and a founder of Impressionism. Austrian painter and illustrator Gustav Klimt, 1862 to 1918, was the founder of the school of painting known as the Vienna Secession. The Kiss, arguably his most famous piece, was the print seen in this episode. Apparently, these two artists are very popular in freshman dorm rooms. Oh, yes, they are.
I wonder what's popular now.
I know. I really want to know. You know what? My niece is a college freshman. I'm going to text her and ask her.
Ask her. I was like, I don't think I know anybody in college anymore, except nope, he graduated. Anyway. Another one, the Stoner Vamp. I wish we got a name for him. Says you can never eat just one when he's referencing freshmen. And of course, Lay's brand potato chips have been using variations of this slogan since 1963.
I didn't realize it went back to the 60s. That's great.
I know. It's a long time.
It's kind of true.
I love this next one.
Buffy says to Giles, okay, remember before you became Hugh Hefner when you used to be a watcher? Hugh Hefner is the founder, publisher, and editor-in-chief of Playboy magazine. And for very sheltered people listening to this podcast, I can't imagine who that is, but that's a magazine featuring nude women. That's a really funny description.
I know. That's like a very PC.
That's a very basic description of what it is. It's a well-known magazine that people read for the articles. It does have a long history of having really great writers write articles for it, because it's meant to be the sort of like classy person's porn. You know, it's a little more wholesome than like Penthouse or those other magazines. Yeah. And Hugh Hefner was known for his lavish parties at the Playboy Mansion, attended by celebrities and Playboy playmates, who are, you know, beautiful young women who have been in the magazine or are just like hired to be beautiful women in scanty outfits walking around the Playboy Mansion. And he is often photographed wearing a smoking jacket, like a velvet smoking jacket, hence the robe reference from Giles, about Giles.
I love it. And then this is, of course, a very pop culture reference with Xander talking about his road trip, saying there's some Purple Mountain's Majesty, I'm gonna have to say. And of course, Purple Mountain's Majesty refers to the lyrics of America the Beautiful, written by Catherine Lee Bates in 1893 and revised in 1913. The following is part of the first verse. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for Purple Mountain's Majesties above the fruited plain. I would love if anybody did not understand that reference. That's like a classic.
I have often wished that was our national anthem instead of
pretty
Star Spangled Banner. It doesn't glorify war, and it's easier to sing. It would make a much better anthem. But
alas.
Buffy says to Xander, you saw the Grand Canyon? And Xander says, I saw the movie Grand Canyon on cable. The Grand Canyon, of course, is a gorge of the Colorado River in northern Arizona. It's over 200 miles long and 1 mile deep. It attracts millions of visitors per year. The movie Xander probably saw on cable, as there are 1949 and 1958 movies of the same name, is the 1991 movie Grand Canyon with Steve Martin, Kevin Kline, and Danny Glover. I have not seen it.
Me neither. I was going to say that might be the one Steve Martin project I have not seen. Might have to Check that out. I know nothing about it. And then, of course, we talked about this earlier. Xander's reference where he says, Avengers Assemble, let's get it going. Avengers, of course, is a Marvel comic book featuring a team of superheroes, if you didn't know, currently including Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, and of course, these days, the universe of the Avengers and Marvel in general. I'm going to say that again. These days, the universe of the Avengers and Marvel in general has expanded exponentially.
Yeah, it's it used to be that like Thor and Iron Man were these tiny, obscure comic book characters.
Jeez, that's hard to picture now.
Yeah. Xander says this. I love this scene. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to anger. Wait a minute. This mangled quote is, of course, from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yoda senses the fear in young Anakin Skywalker, who, spoiler alert, later becomes Darth Vader, and says the following: fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Phantom Menace was released at the beginning of the summer, immediately prior to Buffy season 4 in May of 99. I feel like this line, there's also a version of this line in Empire Strikes Back.
It does sound very familiar.
I bet that somebody in our audience is a Star Wars nerd and will tell us.
I bet, yeah, somebody knows. Let's see. And then, of course, Xander, quoting more iconic films, says, first you get the women, then you get the money, then you... And this is Xander's attempt at quoting 1983's Scarface. The line, spoken by Al Pacino's character, is, in this country, you got to make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the women.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
There are plenty of women who will go to power and go to money. I don't seem to be one of them, but there are a lot of them out there. Buffy says to Xander in response to his rambling, thanks for the Dadaist pep talk, which there's no way Buffy knows what Dadaism is.
I know.
But Dada was an art movement from the early 20th century. The literary manifestations of Dada were mostly nonsense poems with meaningless random combinations of words. Dadaism was sort of the beginning of what we now call performance art, and a lot of the performance aspects of it were about like frightening the audience, surprising the audience, yelling at the audience, like anything to get people out of their comfort zone. It was sort of about waking people up more than it was about what they were saying.
That scene in She's All That, when Lainey kind of does her performance art at the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she's just like, there's like random screaming at the audience. But fun fact, this is not the first time that Dada is referenced in Buffy. We get it again. It's later on, when Spike is making a comment about the Buffy bots' speech habits. Little spoiler.
Oh,
okay. But it works.
Yep.
Oh man.
So in a slightly different division of the podcast, let's talk trivia. Here are some of the script directions for the episode The Freshman. UC Sunnydale Library is described as unbelievably gigantoid.
Very technical.
I don't know if they really captured gigantoid, because that is an actual library that really exists, and it didn't look all that huge to me. Gigantoid, I would think of as some of the sets on like The Expanse or Foundation or Dune Prophecy, where the scale is like larger than human. Anyway.
Yeah.
Riley Finn is described as a junior, tall, and good-looking with an open, honest face. When Buffy makes an idiot of herself when she and Willow first meet Riley, Riley smiles politely at this lamest of comments. Buffy trails behind the other two, awed by her own ineptitude.
Awed by her own ineptitude.
That is the look that she had on her face. Yeah, that's perfect.
Good job, Sarah Michelle Gellar.
As always.
And tying a little bit into Angel, which we will be covering, Christian Kane, who played Wolfram and Hart lawyer Lindsay McDonald on Angel, originally auditioned for the role of Riley Fenn. And he told EW this by saying he auditioned for Buffy for the role that Mark Blucas has. And I do think, Mark Blucas, I see him and I understand the description with an open, honest face.
Yeah, he fits that
that's
perfectly.
perfect.
It's really good casting for the character.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk later in the season about whether we like the character, though.
Yeah.
JW said the following at the posting board about the scene in The Freshman when Buffy's kicked out of class. Oh, wait, I have a sound clip I didn't play earlier.
Oh gosh, it makes me uncomfortable.
Do you understand? You are sucking energy from everyone in this room. They came here to learn. Get out.
I didn't mean to suck.
Poor Buffy. That's such a nightmare situation.
It's awful.
Ugh.
I didn't mean to suck is so funny. That's such a funny
So
thing to say.
cute.
So he said, as to the prof in Buffy episode 1, I freely confess that he's based on an old professor of mine, Joe Reed, who kicked my friend David out of the class day 1 in front of 200 kids. Joe is cool. So I guess JW thought that was cool, the way that guy behaved. He was being a jerk. I get that if you teach something called like whatever pop culture, that you have to be a little rigid about people not, I bet people don't take it seriously, so you have to be extra serious, but like that was mean. He was just mean.
And it's kind of like that tactic of an authority figure picking one person to make an example of.
Yeah.
With her
and if you're just
in class.
There's a scene in Legally Blonde that's very similar where Reese Witherspoon gets kicked out of a class on the first day to be made an example of.
God, I love that movie. Ugh. And I think we talked a little bit earlier, and I think you were talking about the filming locations of UC Sunnydale, and I think after season 4, we see the San Diego locations.
Oh, this was UCLA.
Yes. So for season 4, most of the exterior shots are at UCLA and Westwood, and the library that they go to is the Powell Library on the UCLA campus. But later on, depictions of UC Sunnydale are at different locations.
Got it. There was a deleted line from the episode. Sunday said about Buffy's Class Protector Award, "What better way to say I am the very most of geek?" I'm glad they took that out.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, no. Fun fact, the man in the bronze who looked like Angel was actually Angel because David Boreanaz came back on set and portrayed Angel in that moment up until the point his face became visible when he was replaced with another actor.
I thought they did a really good job finding an actor who looked just enough like David Boreanaz. That was well cast.
100%.
I love this. The original storyline for the character of Sunday was that she was a former Slayer turned vampire. JW also mentioned his regret of killing her off so quickly, as he admitted she made for an interesting character. By the time he realized that, of course, it was too late.
Oh, that would have been really
I've always wanted to see a Slayer turned vampire, because I'm like, would they be like a super vampire? Or would they just be, like, what? How would that affect their vampireness?
That would be
maybe it's in one of the comics.
I wonder. There are so many comics. There's bound to be some storyline like that. And then we did, of course, already talk about how Pedro Pascal really benefited from the residuals he got from this episode, and it kept him from becoming homeless at a time when he said just $7 in his bank account. And recently in 2023, Sarah Michelle Gellar posted a photo on her Instagram of that scene in this episode with Pedro Pascal. And there was a red carpet interview with Pedro with Entertainment Tonight, where one of the interviewers mentioned it to him in passing. And Pedro was surprised and pretty thrilled and moved that Sarah Michelle Gellar remembered him from their brief scenes together. And I thought his quotes talking about his experience on the episode were really sweet. And they asked him what he remembered from his experience working on this episode, and he said everything. Absolutely everything. I remember she, Sarah Michelle Gellar, had ice cream in her trailer and she gave me some. She went back to her trailer, she got me some ice cream, and she shared because it was a night shoot. It was the middle of the night and we were on the UCLA campus. They hadn't built their college sets yet. I actually had to, said I was doing a play in Long Beach and I had to miss opening night because we had to shoot this very, very short moment. I remember everything. I could go on and on. I could give you a step-by-step every detail. I had to have lunch in the vamp mask, in the vamp face mask, which I could only imagine how fun it was to eat with that makeup on your face.
Yeah.
And then later, a couple on the same red carpet, an Access Hollywood reporter asked Pedro about the same post, and he said, I just found out about it, which I'm very excited about, and I can't wait to get my phone back so I can look it up for myself. He was basically making the point that he was so excited that Sarah Michelle Gellar remembers him, which is absolutely precious. And he again said, I remember every moment of shooting that episode, as brief as it was. She was such a kind scene partner and we had the best time. And the interviewer then showed him some stills from the episode. And he said, this is Eddie and the episode is The Freshman. It's the season 4 premiere. It was a super big deal. I hang out with her for a little bit. And as soon as she says goodbye to me, he's killed. I just thought it was so precious how enthusiastically he talked about that and how thrilled he was that Sarah Michelle Gellar remembered him. And of course, this is in 2023 when he has blown up.
Yeah.
So,
like The Last of Us is out. He's been in all these great movies. He had done that amazing stretch on Game of Thrones that everybody was talking about. Like, yeah, he was huge, and he like turned into like a young fan in those interviews. He's like, she remembers me. Like, oh
it's
my
so
god,
cute. Pedro Pascal always just seems so genuine and pure. I just love
they
him.
were talking, that was right around when the internet started calling him daddy all the time, and because I think mostly his role in The Last of Us sort of bumped him into the daddy status. And at the time, Sarah Michelle Gellar was playing the werewolf mom on that show Wolfpack, and and the post actually, the caption was "When Mother Met Father."
That's fantastic. Oh gosh,
it's just
gotta
so cute.
love it.
She has been hitting the interview circuit again lately because of this new show. We'll get to that in news. But before we go there, I have to ask you, does it still slay?
I have to say yes. Shocking no one probably at this point. But while it's not my favorite season premiere, I think it does a really great job, orienting Buffy into this new environment and setting up what's to come, which is a fantastic season. How about you?
I agree. I love this episode because I love Sunday so much. I think she's such a fantastic vampire, and it sets up the whole season really beautifully. At the time, I wasn't loving season 4 at first. The switch to college was sort of disorienting for me, but now that I know where it goes, watching it just makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, I know where this is going, and like I'm so happy.
It is nice on a rewatch.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Let's get into some very exciting news. Carol, want to tell us?
I squealed, I'm not gonna lie, when I scrolled and saw this article pop up on my news feed. And as Penny mentioned, Sarah Michelle Gellar has been hitting the interview circuit pretty hard because she's starring in Dexter Original Sin, the Dexter prequel. And there is an article on Variety, and the title, we'll link it in the show notes, is Sarah Michelle Gellar is now open to return for a Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot. And I am very happy to hear that from her. So she appeared on the Drew Barrymore show and said that she had been considering reprising her role as Buffy in a potential project. She stated, "I always used to say no because it's in its bubble and it's so perfect. But watching, and just like that, and seeing Dexter, Original Sin, 2 spin-offs and prequels," she said, "and realizing there are ways to do it definitely does get your mind thinking, well, maybe." Geller added that Buffy the Vampire Slayer would not necessarily need to be relegated to a prequel either, and that there could be a wealth of different narrative options to pursue. It could be anything, Geller added. It's a universe. It makes you realize that in this world, we need those heroes, I think more so now than ever. And I wholeheartedly agree with her. I would love some more Buffy material to throw myself into, particularly after January 20th, I believe.
Yeah.
And in 2023, the article goes on, the Golden Globe nominee expressed to SFX magazine via IndieWire that she was not particularly interested in being involved in a Buffy revival. And she had said at that time, "I'm very proud of the show that we created and it doesn't need to be done." She said, "We wrapped that up." So I remember a bunch of fans, a lot of the chatter online, being disappointed to hear that from her. And people seem very excited that she's open
Even
to it.
considering it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I am.
that is huge news, really.
I would love to have her back in the role of Buffy, and I would love to see where that character is 20 years later with, the events of season 7 and where all that stuff went. But
Yeah.
that universe has a lot of directions that somebody could go in that don't even need to have Buffy in them. I just most particularly would want her to be in them, but there's room for a lot of other material in that universe.
It'd be so good.
Yeah.
So good.
We've talked about this so many times. Like there's so many ways they could spin that off and we'd all be so happy. Let's get into some feedback. Not a ton for this episode, but great feedback nonetheless.
Bronze things. Things of bronze.
You want to start us off?
Sure. I love Jolene kept it simple and to the point and said, Pedro, with a heart eyes emoji. Indeed.
Yeah. Pedro. Karen said, "I didn't like the whole Buffy's weak because her confidence is low plot. I get that the transition to college will be difficult for her, but yeah, I wouldn't have made that choice. And Joyce, my love, don't start doing stuff to the kids' room until they're out of college." I lost my room before I'd even left the driveway.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh. I don't remember when. I think my little brother took my room over when I left for college.
Yeah. My brothers moved into my room
right.
because it was bigger than theirs. Makes sense.
That's funny. But I love that Joyce really didn't even seem phased or to notice that her daughter was having a hard time. She was
really
just
didn't think I'd see you.
Yeah.
But I'm always happy to see Joyce because I just love her.
I know. Oh, goodness. And we got an email. So excited about this one from Doug. Doug says, "Hi, Penny, Kara, and Sam. After listening to the Cast of the Rings collab with TVPI, I went to Podcastica to see/hear what felt right. And there was still slang. Perfect." Aw. He said, "I watched Buffy season 3, episode 22, Graduation Day part 2, and have just finished your potting." That's a word, right? On it. I love that. It's a word now, Doug.
Yeah.
He said, "Love the flow, chemistry, enthusiasm, breakdown, punctuated with fun semi sequiturs and new information on this classic series. My only questions are, would you mind if I came along for the ride? And when are you beginning seasons 4 and 1 of Buffy and Angel? I couldn't find the schedule on Podcastica." He said, "Peace and take care. Coughing vodka." That's a great username. Said Doug/Les. First, of course, you can come along for the ride.
Yeah.
We are thrilled to have you.
I've been listening to TV podcast industries for a while now, and especially shows that aren't covered by Podcastica. And Coffee and Vodka sends in lots of great feedback. So I'm super excited to have him along for this. This is going to be great.
That's so fun. And I'm glad that you did not mind our semi sequiturs, as you put it.
Yeah, because that's a regular feature.
Yep, those are bound to happen. And he also said, P.S. Thanks for mentioning realistic conflict theory. Now I have an official name for what I formerly called and had once falsely thought an original idea on my part, socioeconomic control theory, or I love this, January 6th syndrome.
Awesome. Awesome.
We are
I love a
happy to
new
have
listener. I love a
Yes.
new feedback sender inner. And I'm excited about moving into season 4 and season 1 of Angel. Everything's great from here on out.
Right.
All right. So that's the end of the main section of the podcast. Stay tuned for the Watcher's Diaries if you want to hear a little spoilery discussion.
And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com and in the show notes for each episode. Also at podcastica.com, you'll find links to our social media pages and all of our other shows.
And as Coffee and Vodka just mentioned, there's Cast of the Rings that we just wrapped up a few weeks ago, covering the season 2 of Rings of Power. And then we did a post-season wrap-up crossover with TV Podcast Industries and their coverage of Rings of Power. That was so fun. And we will be covering the new Tolkien movie that's out in theaters right now called War of the Rohirrim. I saw it 2 days ago and loved it. And we're going to be recording that coverage sometime early in the new year. So I assume that this movie is what lots of people are going to do in the afternoon on Christmas Day with their families. It's perfect for that. So do that.
Nice.
Then sit by yourself for a few minutes with a hot apple cider or something, or some eggnog, and then type up your thoughts on the movie and send them in to us so that we'll cover that on Cast of the Rings.
Yeah. And I have just finished listening to Paik and Daphne's coverage of the new Star Wars series Skeleton Crew, which is perfect to mention in this episode with Phantom Menace. They do a great job covering it. I always love listening to both Paik and Daphne. So if you're a Star Wars fan, definitely check that out. And if you like what we do, please go ahead and give us a 5-star rating, a review, or a like, a follow, or subscribe to our content. And be sure to tune in next time when we'll be covering season 1, episode 1 of Angel, called City of. Thanks, everyone, and...
He said he wasn't coming back until he'd driven to all 50 states.
Did you explain about Hawaii?
Well, he seemed so determined.
Oh, Xand. So precious.
I mean, you could, in theory, get your car to Hawaii on some kind
It's
of
true.
ferry, but I imagine it would cost
Oof.
more than Xander's ever seen in his entire life. All right, that's the end of the non-spoiler section. And if you want to avoid spoilers, now's the time to stop listening. All right, that was enough time. We're going to move on to the Watcher's Diaries.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah. That's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
There are so many little bits and pieces in this
So
episode.
one thing we didn't talk about is the very, very last scene. We see one of Sunday's lackey vampires running, and he gets tased and stopped by 3 dudes in sort of army-ish outfits with
Very mysterious.
ski masks on, so you can't see their faces. And that's all we know. They captured a vampire with electricity and then fade to black. So ominous. We know, of course, that this is the initiative. They are going to be part of the big season 4 overarching plot. And
that was a nice way to kind of subtly introduce them.
Yeah. And it's funny because I always forget that even happened. When I think back on the series, in my head, the first time we find out about the initiative is when they catch Spike. but it's not. We see
Yeah.
this scene first. And then Spike meets this vampire when he's in containment.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh, I am so
yeah.
excited for Spike in season
Yeah.
4.
He
He's
comes
got
soon
some
too. It's like
excellent.
episode 3 or 4 that we get Spike back.
Yep. Oh, I
Um,
can't wait.
and Harmony.
Yes. Oh,
Harmony, the only reason that Sunday wouldn't have worked in season 4 continuing is because Harmony sort of fills the
yeah.
spot of like pretty blonde, mean vampire.
Yeah.
And she does it so
Yep.
beautifully.
She does it so well. Harmony is one of my favorite characters in the Buffyverse.
She's so funny.
It's just
So funny.
it's
And
perfect.
we met Maggie Walsh, and she
Hmm.
introduces herself to her class by referencing that her TAs call her the bitch monster of death. And at first you just think that's like a funny name for a tough professor, but of course
Uh-huh.
she is the bitch monster of death. And
Yep.
and we know that her TAs are all members of the initiative. So like she's telling this room full of freshman students that she's like an evil scientist, but they
I
think she's
can't
just making a joke.
stand her.
Oh, she's the worst.
Like, it's funny and we'll obviously go into this in a ton more detail, but it's funny how season 4 really gives me some of my favorite Buffy moments and some of my absolute least favorite Buffy moments. And a lot of that is thanks to Professor Walsh. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll
She's
see
a
how that
nightmare.
goes.
She is indeed the evil bitch monster of death. And
For real.
it's one of those things, like, so I was saying before, like, I used to hate Riley. Like, when the season was airing, I was always like, God, Riley's so boring. He's not good
Boring.
enough for Buffy. Ugh. But now that I've seen, where the whole show goes, I love Riley. And I'm like, oh, he really did come along in Buffy's life at a time when she needed somebody like kind and sweet. She didn't need at this point to have somebody in her life who challenged her or who was like full of darkness, right? Like Angel was so broody, and like later she's gonna hook up with Spike, and Spike is always like, they're always sparring, even when they're on
So
good
toxic.
terms. There's always some kind of competition, fighting, like until he gets his soul back, there's a lot of threat of violence, but like even when he has his soul back, he still pushes her constantly, right? There's like this crackle between them. But with Riley,
especially at first, Riley is what she needs.
He's so sweet. He really is like just a solidly sweet person. Even when he does bad stuff, it's like kind of sweet. Like his motivations are always sweet.
The way they introduce him ultimately in a couple episodes is after that jackass. Was it Parker?
Oh, Parker.
Yep.
Who is Parker?
I think a lot of people in college experienced a Parker, and Riley kind of saves the day with that. And that obviously, I think it was intentional, endeared me to him more.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, I mean, there's no subtlety about hating Parker. This is not a hot take, right? Everybody hates Parker.
And I hope everybody hates Parker. And if you don't, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. What's wrong with you? Parker sucks. I think I quote Xander. Who else really wants to hit that guy? I think that's what Xander says about Parker. He's the worst. But yeah, Riley really grows on me more and more as the years pass. I have more and more fondness for his character, and
as we mature, maybe.
Yeah.
I think at least that's part of it for me. He's boring in a good way.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. Like, he's a good guy, and he is definitely what Buffy needs, and he gives her some valuable semi-normal relationship experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's involved in something complicated because it's Buffy, but he does.
But at least he's human.
Thank goodness. He offers something very valuable to her.
So about a year after this, I had a crush on this guy, and my brother met him, and I asked my brother what he thought of this guy, and he said, Riley's okay. And the guy's name was not Riley. But as soon as my brother said it, it was all I needed to realize that this guy was way too boring for me and would never be the right
Aw,
person.
that's
And
so funny.
it's so indicative of the way my brother and I have a similar vocabulary and can sometimes talk to each other in shorthand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he used 2 words to express to me the very complicated concept of there's nothing wrong with this guy. He's just not interesting enough for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was right.
That's
And
kind of perfect.
it was hilarious. And I was like, yep, you're right. He's Riley. I might as well skip this part and not
Well
be
done.
interested in that guy.
Funny.
Nothing against that guy. I'm sure he's doing well now and not listening to this podcast.
Oh gosh. Something else we didn't talk about was that silent phone call that Buffy receives in the kitchen.
Next
And
episode, that will be revealed.
yes. And
Next
I love
episode of this
that.
podcast, not next episode
Yeah.
of Buffy.
I love the way that they do those little subtle crossovers of Buffy and Angel. It's nice how they tie things in.
This show was on the early side of self-consciously and intentionally using lots of little Easter eggs for the audience. This show was very savvy about how audience psychology works, and they know that giving you little things like that you can recognize and be like, aha, I'm on the inside, I know this joke.
Yes.
Will reward you and make you enjoy your viewing experience more, and it makes you a more sticky viewer, right? You stay around more because you're getting these little rewards. I don't think that before the 90s television makers were as savvy, and also serialized TV where there was like ongoing stories and characters grew over time and changed over time were still pretty new in anything except soap operas.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this was the beginning of like, you know, like The Shield and The Sopranos and these shows that had longer, more complicated serialized stories. Buffy was one of the forerunners there, as well as being one of the first shows that had a action woman who wasn't just like a Barbie.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It was a real sea change in entertainment. You know, this is before streaming, but after the proliferation of cable networks, there was a lot more content to choose from. TV shows had to step up and be a little bit more progressive and forward thinking in their content and their structure and style and narrative devices to keep viewers.
Didn't The Sopranos premiere in 99?
I don't remember. It was around this time.
Right. Like, because I feel like there were a lot of shows that my parents would watch that I was not allowed to watch.
Yeah.
And I feel like HBO, because I remember Oz, that had come out a few years before.
Yep. Yeah, January 10th, 1999, The Sopranos.
Okay. And Oz, obviously I was not watching that at 15.
I'm still not old enough to watch Oz.
I know. But I remember my parents watching it, and like HBO, if that was on the TV, then I was not allowed in the room. And like you're talking about the idea of these more complex storylines for people to follow, I think Buffy did it in such a relatable way and seemingly with such ease of weaving the storylines of Buffy and Angel together. It's gonna be really fun to cover. And then, of course, one of the most painful moments of foreshadowing is Buffy making that joke about her mom getting the bill for her books and say, oh gosh, I hope it's a funny aneurysm. I was just like, oh
no, it won't be. When we get there, it really won't be funny.
It's not funny at all.
The number of times
opposite of funny.
I'm in a few different like Buffy fan groups on Facebook, and the number of times I've seen somebody post, I just watched The Body for the first time. I didn't know. Nobody told me. Like, Or
like,
I'm
so
revisiting
sorry.
yeah, like I watched the body again, and it just really brings up a lot of stuff for me, and like that episode.
I skip that episode on rewatches. I have not seen that episode in years.
Oh, that's gonna be
So,
fun to cover then.
yeah, I'm gonna have to watch a couple times because the first time it's just gonna be tears.
Oh yeah,
So.
that's a weep fest. That episode.
Whew.
It's so beautiful though. It's so well done.
It is. It's fantastic and brutal all
Yep.
at the same time.
Looking forward to the rest of this season, though, before we get to The Body, which is season 5. We have a couple of my favorite episodes ever are coming. Something Blue.
Yes.
Oh my god, Something Blue it's like one of my go-to, like, I had a bad day, I'm gonna watch Something Blue episodes. Hush
so
is
fun.
so famous.
Iconic.
People talk about Hush, like, it's hard to explain how great that episode is and what an impact it had on everybody who watched it.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Faith return, which is also fantastic. What's it called? Next
That
Year's
is a
Girl or This
great
Year's
one.
Girl?
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
there's a
Year's
lot
Girl.
of great stuff. Oh, the werewolf storylines. There's just so much coming. And we're really excited to be back doing
is it?
Still Slaying and
The
revisiting.
Halloween episode in this season is really
Buffyverse.
great too.
All right, that's the end, the complete end of our show. Thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
Keep slaying. You say let me get that out of my system.
Words.